VIR, this stands for Valves in Receiver. It was a really good idea when they came out with it, but unlike every other model made, this actually put the expansion valve, the receiver dryer, and the POA valve or suction valve all in one unit. Again, it's a good idea if everything is perfect, but in the real world it isn't, and as these cars got older, they became extremely finicky and difficult to work with, very easy to strip out threads. In our world now, unless you're dealing with a show car, this is one of the parts that most often gets converted. And it gets converted because unlike this valve, this is a suction throttling valve, which is used from the mid 60s to all the way back to the early 60s. This from about the end of the time where the suction throttling valve came out to about the 74 or so. These valves and every valve before it can actually be calibrated to bypass at a different pressure. So your R12 cars, as they rolled off the assembly line, were designed to bypass at 30 psi. This valve can be calibrated to do that. This valve can be calibrated to do that. This valve cannot. Even if you open it apart, you're looking at the suction valve, there is no way to calibrate it differently. So you can still use 134A with it, but it's just not going to work that well. Again, unless you're doing this for a show car, I'd steer clear of this valve. You can go with something like this, which is a far superior and more reliable method of it. Clutch cycling system, which GM and most Fords use to this day. Unlike these valves, you splice these two wires right into your clutch wire that goes to the clutch on your compressor assembly, and when you hit when this hits a certain pressure, it's going to open the circuit. It's going to make your clutch disengage, and your air conditioning will not be in function mode until those pressures come back within normal tolerances. This is the most reliable form of air conditioning ever made. It's arguable, but other than some of the very basic under-dash systems that were made many years ago, these you just don't really have problems. You don't have problems with, like these do, with contamination or moisture causing them to stick open, or even these where you'll have the same thing, but there's a little bit easier to deal with. This, again, if you're working with a really clean, original show car that's being judged on a point basis, I would stick with this and go spend a little bit more money on the R12. I would not, under any circumstances, use this with 134A. You're just not going to be happy in the hotter months. Might be okay in a winter if you're driving it around for a weekend cruise or something, but as soon as the temperatures get high, you're going to be sweating, even if this is working at its ideal. All of these, the system does not cycle off. So your compressor is constantly running, and what happens is it just bypasses pressure. So your compressor's not really working hard while it's engaged and running, but it's definitely continued on. It won't turn off until you turn off the air conditioning or switch into a mode that doesn't require the compressor to be on, like heat and defrost and things like that. They still use this exact system, a fixed orifice tube clutch cycling system to this day. And they started GM started going exclusively to this in '77, and it's quite a number of years since then. When you switch over to 134A from the old R12, there are a lot of things to keep in mind. The system has to be clean. If you're reusing any component, they should at minimum be blown out with compressed air. Get anything out, even a little bit of dirty oil, chunks of any kind, you flush them out. Contamination is the #1 cause of failure of air conditioning. And a lot of people will they'll end up with a bad compressor. They'll change the compressor, accumulator, filter dryer, whatever the case may be in the car, and the system has to be changed. And they charge it up and just go. And what happens is they never solve the problem of why the compressor went bad in the first place. So the contamination will go right through, contaminate your newly installed accumulator or filter dryer. and could even have the same problem that you had with the original compressor that was replaced. Same thing goes with really any component in the system that fails. It's usually a result of contamination or moisture. I'm Tim Corleone with Classic Auto Air's Original Air. If you want to see more videos like this, subscribe and be sure to comment or ask questions below.